So Rabbi Weiss and these other Reform leaders you're saying were in the 19th century vehemently opposed to
And
Jews
early 20th.
early 20th. They were opposed to Jews who become Christians. What then is the approach of Reform, which is the crux of your lecture that you were going to give? What is, I mean, we spent the whole time right now explaining what Reform Judaism is.
Reform Judaism, well until the turn of the 21st century, was anti-messianic Judaism. There is a book by David Eichhorn, a Reform rabbi, not of the 19th century, early 20th century, but a late 20th century rabbi, a rabbi in the second half of the 20th century, who wrote a book about the attempts to evangelize the Jews in America, the attempts to, about congregations of Jewish believers in Jesus, Messianic Jews, about such leaders, such personalities. This is, I'll put it moderately and carefully.
Yeah.
He could not take that movement seriously. He could not treat it respectfully. He was very suspicious of Jews who considered themselves to be Jewish at the same time that they accepted faith in Jesus. And his book, very much like following in the what I would call the Isaac Mayer Weiss tradition, in spite of the fact that there is 100 years difference at times between things they wrote, he treats those people as insincere. He did not really give much credibility to the claim to be sincere followers of Jesus, and at the same time wishing to maintain their ties with the Jewish community, to maintain elements of Jewish culture, of Jewish languages, and did not take very seriously what you could call it Christian Zionism, but you can also call it support for the Zionist movements at the time, being part of the Zionist movement. He could not understand that because it was not something that people understood until very recent years. People continued, including in the Reform movement, to view the attempts to evangelize Jews as attempts of delegitimizing Judaism and Jews as non-Christians.
There are attempts like that, though. I mean, to be fair,
Reform rabbis were particularly sensitive because they were accused of deluding Judaism. They were accused of moving away from normative Judaism. They were very often blamed for quote-unquote assimilation. You become a Reformed Jew, you don't treat the tradition seriously. The next step, there's intermarriage. The third step, there's conversion. They felt that they needed to distance themselves from the elements in the Jewish community that are accepting Christianity, that are moving away from the faith. One of their aims has been, from the very beginning, is to pose alternative to assimilation, to pose alternative to Christianization. Here they see Jews that advocate openly amalgamation of Judaism and Christianity, which until the turn of the 21st century, people could not understand. And I think there's more understanding today because there are many, for two reasons. One is that you know very well that joining religious communities became a matter of choice, not of birth or of a tribal just affiliation or loyalty. There's an individual choice involved, commitment. And this is very sincere. A. B. There is American religious groups are very often hybrid. Most of the new groups, particularly that came out of the counterculture, Asian groups that have recreated themselves in America, took root in America. Buddhist groups, Hindu groups, various Christian groups. There are nowadays groups that didn't exist until quite recently, of like groups that promote both indigenous American traditions and rituals with Christianity. It used to be that you had to move.
Let me ask you this. So you mentioned that earlier on in the 19th and 20th century, there was this feeling of that what we today would call Messianic Judaism, right? Let's be careful. I don't know that it was called that in the 19th century for sure, like Hebrew Christians maybe, that it delegitimized Judaism. And I feel like we spent the whole first half talking about reform, and now we have to get into the Messianic Judaism and its relationship.
Absolutely,
so let me ask this. So isn't there something about it that really did delegitimize Judaism? Like, I've been approached by missionaries who say, if you want to be a completed Jew, you have to believe in Jesus. That inherently delegitimizes Judaism, doesn't it?
Well, that is the not just $1 million question. It's by now with inflation the $1 billion question.
Okay.
It's I put a lot of premium on people's intentions, on what they feel, what they think.
Okay.
From their perspective, Jewish believers in Jesus today are sincere followers of Jesus. Many of them have also gone. Most of them have gone what you could call the evangelical way of establishing a personal relationship with Jesus, being born again in Christ, whatever. There are many definitions in many ways. At the same time, that they sincerely see themselves as Jews. That it's not just a few hundred congregations, few hundreds. For the size of American Jewry, that's a lot. A few hundred congregations, tens of thousands of members. I'm going to be provocative.
Yeah.
It's also their interest, sometimes renewed interest, in learning Hebrew and learning Jewish history, in learning about the Holocaust and its details, watching movies, reading books, taking courses at the university on Jewish themes. I will be provocative for a second, just to put things in an extreme way for a moment, and then go back to your question about Messianic Judaism, which is not one thing.
Of course not.
And it's not one thing. It's not unified and uniformed completely at all. But also, like Reform Judaism, like all religious groups, is dynamic and not static, and develops and changes. Let me be provocative. Most members today of what are still mostly known as Messianic congregations, Messianic synagogues, most of them were not raised Jewish. The overwhelming majority did not grow up Jewish, by which I don't mean that I don't know if it's true about the majority that they don't have any Jewish roots. I didn't say that. But there are congregations in which only a minority grew up Jewish. The movement at large has more members that did not grow up in a Jewish home. That is, they might have had a Jewish grandparent. They might have had their spouse might be Jewish, or might have come from a mixed marriage background. But then some people have and a large amount of people don't claim any Jewish roots. Those people joined communities in which some of the prayer, not all of it, is in Hebrew with translation, in which Jewish texts are read and celebrated, in which Jewish songs, very often in Hebrew, are sang routinely, in which the Jewish calendar of meeting on the Jewish Sabbath and celebrating the Jewish holidays is maintained, in which the Jewish symbols, Star of David, and menorah, shofar, in which sometimes in the social hour, the meal or the celebration or the snacks that are offered after either Friday night meeting, which they call very often oneg, or on Saturday noon, early afternoon. They very often eat Jewish delicacies as they are understood in America, including the ubiquitous bagel. And I mean, you probably know that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob ate bagels every day.
One of my major culture shocks is when I moved to Israel in 1993, you couldn't get a good bagel. And true. I couldn't understand it. I'm in the Jewish state and you can't get a bagel in Jerusalem.
Right.
Back then.
And they, in many ways, they are, and where there are lectures on Jewish themes, where there are tours, organized tours to Israel, where they sometimes participate in choirs, dance groups that sing and dance Israeli or Jewish songs. They're also, of course, Messianic. There's also, of course, a unique Messianic culture. But I will make now a provocative claim. Those people, you stay in such a community for 20, 30 years. And in effect, there's a question, who converted to what? Those are Christians who adhere to faith in Jesus, and they maintain that faith, but they are becoming culturally Jewish. They are joining the Jewish fold.
That's interesting that you say that. That's really interesting you say that. I've seen...
Who's evangelizing whom? Who is evangelizing whom?
Yeah.
I mean, it goes both directions. What I'm saying is, you also have to look at people's sincerity. Some people are very comfortable with this hybridity. Yes, many Jews accept Jesus and they go on to non-Jewish communities. And while they perhaps identify as Jewish, it's a question whether they can transmit that to further generations. But the Messianic Jewish community has built a whole network with summer camps and publications and websites and music.
Would it be fair to say that some Messianic Jews are more active in Judaism than non-Messianic Jews?
Totally.
I mean, that seems to be the case.
Totally. Much more so than unaffiliated Jews. They participate in a Jewish community, a community that sees itself in connection with Jewish history, with Jewish covenant with God, which they recognize, with the Jewish state as it is today. They learn Hebrew to some extent or greater extent. They are more affiliated with things Jewish than many other Jews. I think to dismiss that is wrong.
Yeah. So Reform Judaism is the largest denomination of Jews in the United States. What is the attitude of Reform Judaism towards Messianic Judaism?
It has changed throughout the years. In recent years, in the last 20, 30 years, we get voices in the Reform movement that say, we need to accept those people and include them. They're not our enemies. I'm not saying that this is a unanimous decision or there's an article of faith about it, but you get voices. It was only 100 years ago, in the 1920s, 1930s, that the first Reform rabbis, theologians, if you will, came out with not just let's talk with Jews or have meetings with Christians and have meetings with Christians, but let's say, just as we ask Christians to respect our faith, let's look upon their faith as valid and compatible to ours.